spend every Sunday just living good. Might do a little fishing, a little hunting on the weekend. With a bow I'll be sneaking back in the woods. A little bit crazy, every now and then maybe. Like to kick off my boots and get lazy, but I'm living good, yeah.
This episode of Pathfinder Outdoor Journal is being brought to you by Self-Reliance Outfitters, the Pathfinder School, Duluth Pack, Battle Horse Knives, Short Lane Arms, Lansky, Survival Resources, Carbon TV, and Survival Life.
From hunting to fishing to camping to survival, Self-Reliance Outfitters has the quality outdoor gear to help you and your family make the most of your next outdoor adventure. Visit us online at www.selfrelianceoutfitters.com. Outdoor gear for outdoor people.
At the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio, we train hundreds of people each year in short-term emergency survival, emergency preparedness, self-reliance, and sustainability. We train individuals, families, and groups with low instructor-to-student ratios to guarantee the best possible training environment for your money. To join us for an upcoming class, please visit our website at thepathfinderschoolllc.com.
Duluth Pack, handcrafted in Duluth, Minnesota since 1882. True outdoorsmen like Dave Canterbury have been using our canvas and leather products for over 130 years. Our American-made, time-tested craftsmanship makes Duluth Pack the only gear you'll need for your next adventure. Hunting, fishing, bushcrafting, camping, canoeing, business gear, backpacks, all this and more at duluthpack.com.
As we move forward in time, looking now to the late 1800s, we can get a better understanding of what the woodsman carried, or what was recommended for the woodsman to carry, whether he was hunting, camping, fishing, or just wandering, or tramping, as Nesmith would call it. And in 1887, John M. Gould wrote a book called Camping Out. John M. Gould was a post-Civil War soldier. And he wrote this book to try to explain to young men what it takes to camp out in an environment. And we can gain a lot of information by looking through his book and looking at what he recommended for people to carry and pack, depending on how they chose to travel. And what I want to look at today is I want to look at his theories on walking and camping. So let's first look at clothing changes that took place over that period from 1750 to 1850. Obviously, pants became longer and pantaloons became the norm, although knee breeches were still worn, especially at social events or sporting type events. Cotton became a more common fabric. Homespun was replaced by manufactured clothing, although homespun or handmade clothing was still very popular well into the period of the Civil War. Regular boots, or brogans, as they were called during the Civil War, were still recommended late into the 1800s by these writers as the normal, most comfortable wear for the woods. In John M. Gould's book, Camping Out, he discusses weight. And he talks about 20 pounds or 20-ish pounds being the standard carry that a person should expect to have to carry over distance of 10 miles or more per day when traveling. And he talks about several different methods of carry, and one of the methods he talks about is what you see here, very reminiscent of the Civil War soldier, where the blanket was draped over the body in horseshoe fashion and tied at the bottom. And he recommended this carry because it was convenient to change this configuration from shoulder to shoulder if you got tired, or if your shoulder were to get tired, or you started to sweat, or anything like that, you could move that back and forth on your body. It was a very convenient way to carry things. He also recommended carrying a haversack of sorts and a canteen. John Gould recommended carrying a canteen. This canteen is made from copper, and it's a kidney-shaped design with a cork stopper, very reminiscent of canteens from the Revolution all the way through to the Civil War. But canteens came in lots of varieties, from wood to leather, what they call jackware, to tinware, and also copper. It's important for us to understand the context of John Gould's book. Camping Out was written about camping out. It's not a book about survival. It's not a book about wandering through the wilderness. And it's not really a book on how to hunt game, fish, or trap. It is about traveling and what it takes to travel comfortably, what things you need to carry to travel comfortably from point A to point B. So let's first discuss the haversack. The haversack was for carrying your food items. But the haversack is a very important piece of equipment if you're following the methodology of John Gould, where you're carrying that horseshoe blanket roll, because anything that's in that blanket roll is not going to be readily accessible. So anything that you need readily accessible, you're going to have to carry on your body or in a separate pouch. The haversack became that pouch. You would carry your food items in the haversack, but you may also carry things like your fire kit, a pair of reading glasses, your journal, a compass. Anything that you might have to get to readily on the trail without unrolling your blanket to get to it would be placed in your haversack. This is a very simple haversack made from oilskin. It's very lightweight, but it's fairly waterproof. This one is several years old and still does the job very, very well. Inside this haversack, I have a small linen bag wrapped with a buckskin thong that contains greasewood or fatwood and beeswax candles. And these would be aids in fire starting to help me with an emergency fire. The bag has been waterproofed with linseed oil to help maintain it, but the haversack is also oilskin to keep things inside dry. I also have a leather pouch in here that contains the majority of my fire starting kit. It also contains a spice horn filled with salt to salt my food, a candle stub, some greasewood, a tin containing a sunglass for magnification type fires, and then also a metal tin of matches. And by this point, matches were the preferred method of fire starting. I have a tin boiler or tin pot of 1 quart size that contains my food rations for one day. I have a maple sugar cake, a pouch of beef jerky, and a package of parched corn. Parched corn was a very popular trail food throughout the 18th and 19th century. You would take corn off the cob after it was dried, place it into a well-greased pan, and cook it until it parched, not until it popped. So it looked very much like the corn nuts of today. It was carried in some type of breathable material or paper. Then it would be eaten on the trail, chewed up and swallowed and chased with water so that it would swell up in the stomach and keep you full. Battle Horse knives are heirloom quality knives, built for the outdoorsman by outdoorsmen. With years of experience, Battle Horse makes the best quality knives on the market today and stand behind their knives with a 100% lifetime guarantee. From the PLSK Scout to the Trapline Companion to the Nesmic and everything in between, Battle Horse can make a knife to fit your needs. Whether I'm hunting, fishing, trapping, or just recreational camping, a Battle Horse knife is always on my side. At Short Lane Arms with sub-caliber adapters, they make your single-shot 12-gauge shotgun a one and done for your hunting arsenal. With everything from rimfire cartridges in 22 long rifle to 17 HMR to centerfire pistol cartridges in 38 caliber to 45 ACP. The greatest versatility with the Short Lane Arms sub-caliber adapter is in the 8-inch rifle adapter models. You can match your sidearm to your 12-gauge shotgun with an 8-inch rifle adapter to make it even more versatile than a shotgun alone.
Hi, I'm John McCann from Survival Resources. We specialize in custom survival kits, all the components necessary to build your own survival kit and emergency preparedness products. Check us out at survivalresources.com.
So John Gould describes in his book several ways of carrying your gear if you are going to camp afoot. One of the ways that he describes is the horseshoe bedroll. This horseshoe bedroll was very common carry during the Civil War by soldiers of that era. It was very simplistic in that all of your gear that you didn't need immediate access to would be rolled up in the blanket, and that would be slung over your shoulder just like this in horseshoe fashion. Gear that needed to be gotten to immediately or on the trail would be then kept in a haversack, and you would carry a canteen for your water. So let's look at this bedroll in more detail and understand that it was tied together basically with 4 pieces of cordage, generally made of cotton or hemp in the period, and those pieces of cordage could further be utilized after they were taken off if you were carrying some type of canvas or tarp to make shelter as well. The knot being used to hold this together is a very simple jamming type knot that comes undone very easily. I can break it down fairly simply and take it off. I'm going to explain to you real quick how this is done. I've got a knot in one end of the cordage here to keep it from fraying out. I have a knot in the other end of the cordage to keep it from fraying out. And then I have a knot a few inches down, 5 or 6 inches down, that becomes a stopper knot. And what I do is I take this cordage and wrap it over the top, and here's my stop knot. I tie another overhand knot in that cordage and place this through that overhand knot. When that is cinched down tight, it will then pull this stop knot into the other one here, just like this, to prevent it from coming out, and creates a binding slip knot or a jam type knot. And then I can come over the top with the 2 tails and tie a square knot. And at that point, I'm ready to go. And it's very easy to get undone when the time comes. Once the ropes were removed, the bedroll could simply be stretched out on the ground and unrolled. This. A large, fairly thick wool blanket like this queen size blanket would have given the traveler great advantage, not only for sleep gear but also for outerwear. He could have wrapped up in a queen size blanket to give him multiple layers covering his body to trap the body heat and give him better insulation on a cold night. The norm, however, would have more than likely been a thinner wool blanket of twin size like this one, or possibly 2 if he had the means. This is a typical Civil War era style wool blanket. One great camping improvement that happened during the Civil War was when Goodyear patented its process of vulcanization for rubber. Goodyear made many blankets during the Civil War called the gum blanket or the rubber blanket. And their process allowed them to take a piece of canvas, like 6-ounce canvas, and impregnate that canvas with rubber to create what was called the rubber or the gum blanket. It was a 5x7 piece of canvas generally with a few small grommet holes in it that could be used for a shelter, a ground cloth, or a makeshift poncho type device. And some of these were even made into ponchos, and some of them were cut down. Many soldiers would carry 2 of these if they had the means. The gum blanket became a very useful and standard carry item for many campers and trampers for many years after the Civil War. There are writings in Horace Kephart's book over 50 years after the Civil War speaking of the usefulness of the rubber blanket. The further contents of the bedroll described in Gould's book would not be much different than what was carried by the 18th century hunter or traveler. A pair of extra woolen socks, some type of bag that could be used to makeshift a pillow, a rag that could be used for personal hygiene, and the items inside like lye soap, a boar's bristle toothbrush, and tooth powder, and then some type of sleeping shirt or night shirt or spare shirt or garments of some kind. When John M. Gould speaks of rolling up the blanket roll in his book, he talks about the possibility of needing 2 people. If you roll from the middle a couple rolls and put your knee on the blanket, and then roll the ends in like this, switch knees, and roll the end in again. I find that that works fairly well to secure the blanket roll. I generally will roll in one side of my blanket here, like an envelope, and then complete the roll and make sure that everything is nice and tight. And then place my ropes on my roll. One thing that's very important for us to understand and look at as we gain our doctorate in woodsy knowledge is understanding the story behind the story. We need to look at the writer that has written the book that we're reading and understand his mentality when writing that book. When you look at John M. Gould's book and he talks about camping out, he's looking at that from a perspective of a person who was a Civil War soldier. And this type blanket roll, while it may fit lots of people very well, you can see that even with the Civil War era type blanket rolled lengthwise, it's very short when it's pulled together on my body stature. And that's important to understand. I'm only 5'8", a little over 200 pounds. But most of the Civil War uniforms that I looked at, of the 50 or so that are on display at the Civil War Museum in Dallas, Texas, I don't think any of them would have fit me. Most of them look like they were for someone who was about 5 foot to 5'6", and probably 120 to 150 pounds or less. So a carry like this that's folded over your body is going to be much different on someone of a larger stature with a wider chest and bigger shoulders than someone who is fairly narrow in stature. And most of the Civil War uniforms that I saw were built for someone fairly narrow in stature. I've also seen pictures on the internet of this exact carry in period photographs of Civil War soldiers. There were 3 soldiers pictured in that photograph, and none of them looked like they weighed over 120 pounds. So what type firearm would the hunter of the mid-1800s have carried to secure meat for himself or for his family? Well, in 1820, the percussion cap system of ignition was invented, but it wasn't quick to catch on. It meant purchasing another component to fire his weapon in the form of a percussion cap and later a musket cap. Many flintlocks were in service through the Spanish-American War and into the early Civil War period as well, and still later yet beyond the Civil War as a family heirloom type weapon. But many of them, like this one, which used to be a flintlock, were later converted to a cap lock ignition system from an existing flintlock. And this is a 62 caliber fusil, just like my flintlock, that has been converted to cap lock. This is the model 1842 Springfield 69 caliber smoothbore musket, and almost 250,000 of these firearms were produced by both Springfield Armory and Harper's Ferry with interchangeable parts just prior to and at the beginning of the Civil War for issue to soldiers. Later it was replaced by rifled barrels in a standard caliber, but this type firearm would have been available post-Civil War to the hunter or woodsman to help feed his family. Being a smoothbore weapon, it was capable of firing both shot and round ball, making it very versatile for both small and large game hunting. This musket takes a musket cap, whereas a normal cap lock ignition system like this converted fusil take a number 11 percussion cap. The first and foremost advantage that I can see to a military weapon like this is because they made so many of them, replacement parts would have been readily available. If something were to break or malfunction, it would be much easier to replace than something that may have been custom converted into a cap lock from a flintlock firearm. Maintenance is another large issue to think about when you're talking about a long-term firearm that you're going to use in the woods for hunting. In my mind, a military grade firearm like this model 1842 would have great advantage to the hunter long-term over something like a converted flintlock. Older firearms like this were difficult to completely disassemble. You could remove the nipple, you could remove the lock plate, trigger mechanism, and hammer, and maintain them very easily, but the barrel was difficult to remove from the wood furniture because it was pinned in place with several brass pins. When you cleaned this weapon, you basically poured hot water down the barrel with the nipple removed and plugged, and then flushed the barrel with either hot water and soap or hot water and ash. That would allow water to seep underneath the barrel and into the wood furniture, where it would sit and possibly rot over time unless it was thoroughly dried. With a weapon like this 1842, the barrel is held on by barrel bands that have clips that are removable, so you can push the clip, slide the barrel band forward, and all three bands come off. The one screw in the back, which is the same as a normal weapon of this nature, comes out, and the barrel can be removed from the wooden furniture and completely cleaned, as well as the lock plate, face, trigger, and hammer assemblies. So I think that a military weapon like this would have much more advantage for long-term feasibility than a weapon like this. The biggest advantage of the smoothbore firearm is the versatility of ammunition for the woodsman or hunter. You can shoot anything from round ball to the smallest of shot, any combination in between. During the Civil War, this weapon was very effective on man-sized targets out to 200 yards with a load called buck and ball. And it was a 63 to 64 caliber round ball combined with 3 to 4 32 caliber buckshot balls. And it was said that out to 200 yards, that was an effective load on a man-sized target over 70% of the time. This week's survival tip on Pathfinder Outdoor Journal is brought to you by Carbon TV. Join me this week with our tip or trick as we make chewed ball for our smoothbore musket. Shot is the hardest thing to reproduce in the wild, other than grabbing rocks, pebbles, stones, things like that, broken glass. But as far as lead goes, shot is the hardest thing to duplicate. What's easy to do with just a couple of implements is to make round ball. So if you carry shot, you can then melt that shot down, and if you're carrying a lead ladle and a lead mold, either in a buckshot or in a round ball mold like 71 caliber, which is what I use for my 12 gauge, you can then take some of that shot, melt it down to make the round ball that you desire, but you always have that hardest component to recreate in the shot with you. Okay, so what I've done here is I have poured some shot into this ladle and melted it down. And you can see that molten lead in that ladle. And that's what we're going to turn into round ball. Now the other thing that I carry is a 71 caliber round ball mold. And I'm going to lay it here beside the fire to heat it up. And I'm going to want a good pair of gloves, leather gloves, to perform this operation. Okay, so generally the first ball or two that you mold may not come out completely right. You can see that one's got a little bit of waviness to it. So we're going to put that one back in and melt it in a minute when it cools down. Right now we're going to leave it in here to keep the mold heated up until we get some more lead melted down to make another ball. Then we'll just remelt that one. Now generally speaking for this, we're not trying to keep a big fire. We just want a good bed of embers that we can work with to keep this lead hot. It's not working too bad right now. I got just about what I want, feeding small sticks in at a time. I got our mold laying there heating up. Should be ready to rock. I just poured another one in here. We'll see what happens. The first one's a little off and we're going to melt it down again. Let's put it right back in the ladle and let it melt. We're not wasting any lead that way. We're only going to make as many balls as we think we're going to need right away. So I may only make 3 or 4. Throw them in the bottom of my shooting bag, and I won't make any more. I'll save the shot, because again, that's the hardest thing to recreate. And if I need more round ball, I can always make more very easily with these 2 implements. Okay, shake that dude out of there. That one's looking better. They're looking better. Every time we cast one, they're looking better. Okay, so this ball is fairly cool now. That was laying here on top of the stump. And we need to cut the sprue off of it. And we just take our sprue cutter and we put it right over the top of that ball, just like this. And we cut that sprue off of the ball. I'm getting ready to make this into what's called a chewed ball. And you can do this with a 4-way, a small 4-way file will do all of this stuff. I just happen to have a horseshoe rasp that I'm using in this. We're going to need an anvil, and then we're going to take our horseshoe file, and we're basically going to rough this ball up, because it's lead, just like this, and we're going to put dimples all over the ball. Number one, it makes it so you don't have to patch this ball, so it makes it much easier to load. The dimples that you create by doing that roughing up of the ball to make that what's called a chewed ball. Makes it more aerodynamic, like a golf ball, which is supposed to make it more accurate. The biggest advantage to me is I don't have to patch the ball. Okay, so that gives us 4 chewed balls for the shooting bag. That's 4 shots. We've got a big game animal like a deer. If we need more, we can always make more. Well, I'm Dave Canterbury with Pathfinder Outdoor Journal, and we appreciate you joining us today for this episode. You know, dogs were also something that was a constant companion even to Civil War soldiers. Against general orders, many Civil War soldiers carried dogs with them afield and even into battle. They have been a constant companion of man since the beginning of time in the woods. I encourage you to take your dog and your child to the woods. God bless you. We'll see you on the next episode of Pathfinder Outdoor Journal. Come on, Rufus.